Yes, welcome to It Factor News podcast. This is Wayne Benitez, ladies and gentlemen. We have a special guest. He's running for Maryland governor of 2026 election up against Westmore. Yes, we welcome Andy Ellis, Green Party candidate for governor of Maryland.
Thank you, Wayne. Excited to be here. Excited to get into this conversation and see where it goes.
Yes. What got you into running for governor of Maryland?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been a Green actively. I've long believed that the two-party system wasn't very good, but I've been a sort of active Green in the last 10 years or so. After the Baltimore police murdered Freddie Gray, I looked around and saw a lot of people in community with really good solutions, and a lot of people in office that had wanted nothing to do with those solutions, didn't want to hear them except when it was convenient for them. So I got involved back then. I've been doing the work for a while, and coming out of the 2022 election, I saw our candidate Nancy Wallace and Pat Elder, who had just been running for like 3 months and didn't have a great campaign together, do pretty decently. They got, almost to 1%, and 1% is a crucial number for Greens. If we get 1% in the governor's election, it means we can be on the ballot in 2028. So like Baltimore city elections, we'd be able to be on the ballot for. Otherwise, we'd have to collect 10,000 valid petition signatures. So I looked at that race 2022, saw the opportunity was there, started planning for it. Didn't know what Westmore was going to be like as governor, but I had a pretty good idea based on how he campaigned and who was supporting him that we were going to get a lot of what we got. And I think I've been right on that. And I'm excited to be getting ready to run against him next year.
Yes. What's your thoughts of Westmore going into next year's budget deficit of $1.3 billion or for the financial deficit for next year? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we did a segment about this on our live stream last week, and I think is that Moore does not. He raised taxes last year, and it was really bad for him politically. Even though he promised he was going to do it when he ran in 2022. In 2022, he promised he was going to raise taxes on the wealthy people like him. He promised that he was going to close corporate tax loopholes like the things that have paid him and his friends his whole life. But he didn't do it until 2025, and he took a big hit for it. So even though we need to do more of that in order to pay our bills and to do things, I don't think he's going to do it. So that being the case, I think we should look for this being a year where he tells us a whole lot of, I have to cut this program in order to save it. And that's going to be things like he tried to cut last year: disability services, public schools, transit. We think that all those things are probably pretty likely to get cut this year. And he's going to tell us that, he has to do it in order to save those programs. I think that's one option. I think that on the table is still raising taxes on the wealthy, closing corporate tax loopholes, and stopping, corporate tax giveaways.
Yes. It's just been a burden on so many, and
yeah, I mean, you there?
and yes,
You
here we
back?
go.
Okay, great. There we go.
Yes. And it just seems like these registration fees, it's not cutting it along with the emissions, and it's so difficult, especially when people have cars to be fixed or work, dealing with work hours and
Yeah.
living paycheck to paycheck. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in 2022, he talked about how he was going to tax the wealthy and make everybody pay their fair share and make the corporations, pay their fair share. And he was going to take care of the working person. He got into office. He passed all these fees and hidden taxes that make working folks suffer. And then he waited till last year when it was politically convenient for him to do what he said he was going to do and raise taxes on the wealthy and close the corporate tax loopholes. Meanwhile, they had no problem passing on those taxes and fees to us, making it so it's easier to gamble, making it easier to do all those things. But I think we just need to go back to the very obvious answer, which is there are very wealthy people who are making a lot of money and moving a lot of money around who live in Maryland, and we should tax them to the point that we are able to pay for the things we need without passing it on to working folks. And then we should go find all the corporate tax giveaways that we're giving, close those, and make sure that we're not letting people do business in Maryland on our dime instead of helping our people.
Yes, that is definitely true. Also, and um, definitely he's not living on his promises, and then also the rate Larry Hogan's $3.5 billion raining day fund is gone, basically disappeared, wiped out.
Yeah, and they said that there's some rainy day money left, but last week the budget office said we couldn't spend any of that on the deficit because we've leveraged it against bond payments so that we can do things like give the Ravens, the Orioles, and Pimlico a bunch of public money. And so it's like we have debt, we don't have very much revenue, and we have a whole lot of bills. And that situation, I think, means cuts are going to get made this year, and they're going to be drastic. They're going to be bad, and I think a lot of people are going to feel the impact of that.
Yes. And also, one of the listeners, Mark, wanted to know about Maryland's transportation is getting out of hand. It's worse. There's no upgrades to the subway, and usually people can't get to work. Um, and what is your plan for governor for transportation?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, the transportation fund, like everything else, is getting squeezed by these sort of corporate tax breaks and everything else. We've got to be able to have the revenue coming in first and foremost, and coming in from the people who have the money, so that we can fund the transportation program, so that we can make sure that the buses run accurately and on time, so that the subways get built and the projects don't overrun by billions of dollars, right? We need transit. And we need to make sure that that system is working and that it has the money that it needs without passing on all sorts of increased fees to drivers, or without passing all these fees on to drivers and riders. It's like folks are struggling with all the prices that are going up right now. And the key thing, if we want the revenue to fix this, has to be to increase taxes on the wealthiest people in Maryland, and increase and cut the corporate tax loopholes and cut the corporate tax welfare. That's the short term. And the long term, I think we need to set up a public bank so Maryland's money is not invested in Wall Street, but is instead invested right here, and use that in order to pay for transportation upgrades, to pay for infrastructure upgrades and things like that. Places that have public banks, North Dakota has used public banking in order to pay for a lot of college for people in the state, has used it to pay for needs of people in the state. And if we looked at a model like that here, we'd be able to get our money back from Wall Street, save all those fees that we're giving to the big banks, and use it to put it back into things like transportation. So again, all of this comes back to we've got to change our relationship to wealthy people and corporations here in Maryland, and not give away the farm for them with the hopes that it'll trickle down to the rest of us, because we see how that's working. Prices are going up for us and profits are going up for them.
Yes, it is. And also, even Maryland has the most federal job losses of any other state.
Yeah.
Even on the state level, layoffs that Westmore had hired more people, and he had to do layoffs from that, and including hospitals, and then on top of that, you got the AI situation that certain thousands of jobs is not coming back in Maryland.
Yep. Yep. I mean, look, Maryland for too long has been dependent on the federal government in order to have all of our tax base. And that worked when it worked, but now it's not working. And we need to be looking at a Maryland in the future that is not dependent on one or two big corporations, not dependent on the federal government, but is dependent on people being able to have small and medium-sized businesses that they own, that are in their community, and that they can use to employ other folks. Doesn't mean that the federal jobs are, we should have as many of those as we can. It's an important sector, and we can't replicate it with small businesses and cooperatives. But we need to have an economy that is diversified and building for the long term, so that we can work together when prices get high and times get tough in order to take care of each other. I think that I don't think there's a short-term fix to this problem. I think it's going to be bad for a while because we've built our whole economy on the federal government, and we've now seen how easily that can be taken away. We've got to be thinking not about how do we go back to when Joe Biden was president or back to when Larry Hogan was governor. We got to think about what we want 10 years from now, the kind of way that we want Maryland to be structured. And I think we need to be looking at an economy that is not dependent on Washington and not dependent on Wall Street.
Yes, and he's been using, rhetoric from Donald Trump's to blame. We understand Trump's to blame, but also Westmore is to blame also for these for the cost of living in Maryland to be the top 5 in state in America now.
Yep. And I mean, look, in 2022, if he had raised taxes on some of the wealthier people, 500,000 and above, like he did last year, in 2023, there would be more money. We wouldn't have had to have cuts to disability. We won't have to have cuts to public schools. We won't have to have cuts to transit. He ran on that. People agreed with him at the time. He could have done it then. And instead, he played around with it for politics so that he could create a crisis last year and get some of the cuts that he wanted. I think Donald Trump has some responsibility, and so do the Republicans in D.C. Westmore and the Democrats in Annapolis also have responsibility. The problem with the way that the two parties talk about it is they only talk about one of the party's responsibility, the other guy, and they never talk about their own. And like Westmore has responsibility, Donald Trump has responsibility, and so do federal and state lawmakers. A lot of people have gotten us in this situation, and it does us no good to just try to, play team sports and say, no, the red team caused this, or no, the blue team caused this. Both of them caused this, and we're paying the price.
Yes, we are. And like so many, people believe in the corporate rhetoric about third parties can win and they had dysfunction, and that's not even true right there. That's the capitalists been holding back third parties for decades.
Yeah, right. I mean, the well before the Republican Party or Abraham Lincoln ever talked about abolition as a political objective, in 1844, the Liberty Party ran an abolition, and they said that both the Whigs and the Democrats were parties of the slaveholders, and they ran an abolition, and they had enough of a difference to stop the lesser evil, quote unquote, Whig from winning, and the worse Democrat won. And the Whigs coined a term that we still hear today called spoiler, in order to describe that. And it's really worth remembering where that comes from. In 1844, both parties wanted to maintain and expand slavery. A third party said, no, we're not going to do that. And if that's the way that you want to vote, we're drawing a red line there, and we're asking people to join us. Enough people joined them that it threw the results of the election, and the slaver party that lost decided to call those abolitionists spoilers. There's a pretty straight through line to the 2024 election from that, I think, and to a whole bunch of other elections. Third parties are here to disrupt the two-party system and to change outcomes in ways that won't happen without them. And I think for us, we want to think about like, what does winning mean? Winning means to us, if we were able to push Wes Moore on this reparations thing in a way that makes him do something different, great, that's winning. If we're able to push Wes Moore so there's less austerity cuts that are coming to people's paychecks and programs and Marylanders have more in their pockets, that's winning. So, I think we need to understand the role that third parties have played in the history of US politics, redefine winning away from I'm going to be the next governor, which I'd love to be, but I also know that the capitalists and the media and the system is going to try hard to stop that, and understand that we can get wins by doing things like disrupting the system in a way that gets better outcomes for the people who live in UNI's neighborhoods.
Yes, also, especially Maryland Public Television is one of the reasons that third parties haven't gotten there since, I think, 06 or 08, the last Green Party candidate that ran on the debate stage.
Yeah. And so we've made it an issue since day one to get Maryland Public Television to open up the debates to everybody who's on the ballot. In the past, they have said that the only people who are allowed on the debate stage are candidates who are polling over 10%. Well, the problem is no Green Party or no third party candidate for governor in Maryland's history since the Civil War has gotten more than 10%. So they've set the bar at a place that nobody would ever reach. So we have a petition that is trying to get them to open up the debates. There's also a bill that is going to come in the General Assembly this year that will address this question, and we will be looking to work on that bill. Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, who is a Baltimore-based grassroots Black think tank, is also working on that bill with us. And tonight on my show at Go Green 2026 at 7 p.m., we'll be talking to Lawrence Grand Prix from Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. We'll talk a little bit about that debate issue. For us, we believe that when Marylanders see that they have multiple choices, they will like those choices and vote for them. And we think that the two parties know that, and that's why they keep people off of the debate stage. They just want people to think that politics is the two of them, not what most people think it is, which is a diversity of opinions.
Yes. Also, Wes Moore been under fire with Black Marylanders once he vetoed the reparations study also, and he never backtracked it ever since then. And they don't want to. It's like most of them don't want to challenge him to over veto it or anything.
We'll see what happens. Yeah. So last year there was a bill that was passed that would have done a study about reparations. And I agree with Wes Moore that we don't need any more studies to figure out if reparations are due. We know they're due. We do need a study like the one that was proposed last year to figure out what to do. And what that bill would have done is it would have directed the state to figure out what it needs to do to calculate and pay reparations to people who were who are descended or who have lineage connections to people who were, enslaved in Maryland, but also to people who were victims of racist policy from, the end of the Civil War up until the Civil Rights era. So what you end up with is a bill that would have said Maryland, who was a slave state at the Civil War, 87,000 people enslaved in the state of Maryland, even though it stayed in the Union throughout the Civil War. Those people were not emancipated by the Emancipation Proclamation because Maryland was still in the Union, and the Emancipation Proclamation only applied to the Confederate states. And Maryland didn't have federal Reconstruction because of that. So we only had 2 years of Reconstruction in Maryland as opposed to a decade like the rest of the folks had. And in 1866, Democrats, mad about that 2 years of Reconstruction that we had, took back the General Assembly in Annapolis, and they've never given up control since then. Democrats have been in charge of the General Assembly in Annapolis from 1866 to 2026 with about 4 years, maybe 8 years spaced out in that time where they weren't in charge. So this bill would have looked at that history, would have looked at the racist history that has ongoing effects of people in Maryland, figured out what was eligible for reparations, who was eligible for reparations and how to pay them. And then they would have made recommendations to the General Assembly at the end of 2026, the governor and the General Assembly at the end of 2026, and then the bill would have been probably introduced in 2027. Westmore vetoed that last May, and he said, we don't need another study, and I'm doing a bunch of stuff, basically. Right. And so we'll see. We'll see if that bill is going to get overridden, if that veto is going to get overridden. Everybody I talk to seems confident that it is, but they're also, I think, a bit nervous that it's not going to be. And, for me, I'm a member of the Green Party. The Green Party has had reparations in our platform for 25 years. It has been a thing that we've been talking about for a very long time. We've started answering those questions. What should we do? And up on our website, we have a comprehensive reparations policy for Maryland. gogreen2026.com/reparations. You can read what we would suggest if we were in charge about the way to make repair reconciliation and to allow Maryland to recognize the role that the state played in white supremacy and systemic racism.
Yes. Also, Westmore vetoed several other bills, like for climate change. He did that also. Even he completely ignored the protect immigration also from ICE, and he didn't do it. And now they've been going after Marylanders from Bowie and other parts of Baltimore County.
Yes, I'm sorry, my friend Mr. Wendell joined. And he is Mr. Wendell, like the 90s Arrested Development song. So people always say, is it Mr. Wendell like the song? Yeah, it's Mr. Wendell like the song. So Westmore vetoed a variety of things. He vetoed a bill that would have made polluters pay. The top energy corporations and the top oil corporations would have had to pay for the damage they've done to Maryland. So things like the open air coal pit in Curtis Bay that the community has been fighting for years might have gotten, CSX might have had to pay something to remediate that. He also vetoed a bill that would have studied the impact of data centers on the state of Maryland. And Karen Lewis Young, who is from Frederick County, were, sort of ground zero for the first version of the data center fight. Karen Lewis Young at the time proposed the bill and said, we need to study this stuff so that we can learn what's happening so that we don't repeat the mistakes that Virginia made. Legislature passed it. Westmore vetoed it. Tonight on the show, we're going to be talking a little bit about why Westmore vetoed it. He just sent a proposal last month into the electricity regulator, PJM, the regional organization. Mm-hmm. And he did it with the governors of a couple of other states and the chief lobby for the data center industry. So Westmore, Josh Shapiro, and the Data Center Coalition, which is made up of like Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon, all those folks, are advocating for a policy that would allow quicker building of data centers, that would allow less review, that would allow less regulation. So Westmore doesn't want to study it because he knows what the study is going to say. He knows the study is going to say this is bad for communities, it's bad for the energy grid, it's an unsustainable way to grow the economy, and it's bad for it's bad for Black and brown communities and working class communities that live near these things. He knows what it's going to say. The studies are pretty clear, and the lobbying organizations that he's working with have surely told him what the studies are going to find. So he vetoed all that stuff. And then when it comes to ICE, he let Senate President Bill Ferguson handle that dirty work. There was a bill last year that would have stopped ICE from being able to work with MAGA sheriffs here in Maryland in order to run their deportation pipeline out of Maryland. And it was, it had a lot of support, but there was a poll that came out at the beginning of January that said that 70% of Marylanders wanted to cooperate with ICE at the time. And so they killed it. They had Bill Ferguson, president of the Senate, kill that bill last day, literal shady backroom deal to kill that bill. And then they realized that they were wrong about the polling. And now most Marylanders say that they don't want to cooperate with ICE. So this year, after a year of damage has been done to Maryland families, communities, churches, schools, all sorts of other organizations, now they're coming back and saying that they want to try to pass last year's law again. The question is, how many families have been devastated and broken up by their political calculation last year? It'd be great if they pass it this next year, but there's still a lot of damage that's been done that they could have avoided.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Also, the fair wage.
Lost you, Wayne. You back? There
Yes.
you go.
Yes. This group was trying to get 20. Went to Annapolis. They're trying to get $25 as the state minimum wage for Maryland, but they Westmore administration turned it down, and so they trying to get it on the ballot for next year. And what's your thoughts of it? Well, Green parties and you support it?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we think we should pay a higher wage. 25 is fine if we can get it passed. I think it should probably be higher in a place like this where the cost of living is so high, but 25 is better than what we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, like, they're still going to have to get it past 3/5 of the General Assembly in order to get it on the ballot as a constitutional amendment. Maryland does not have the ability for citizens like you and me and other folks to go gather petitions in order to put a constitutional amendment on. We have that power in our counties. So in Prince George's County or Montgomery County or Baltimore City or Baltimore County, we can do that. We can circulate a petition and we can put something on the ballot. But we don't have that power as individuals in Maryland at the state level. So we're going to need to get some Democrat in Annapolis to propose this bill, and we're going to need 3/5 of both houses in order to pass it for it to go on to the ballot. We'll see if that happens. I don't have a lot of faith in Annapolis Democrats in an election year to raise wage or to put something in front of voters that would raise wages that much. But we hope it passes, and we'll work for it if it's on the ballot.
Yes. And definitely also, what's your thoughts of Westmore, Bill Ferguson, and I forgot the state house leader taking bribes and from corporate PACs from BG&E, along with a handful of delegates and city councilmen.
So, I mean, campaign finance is broken in Maryland just like it is broken across the country. And we need to shine light on it. We need to shine light on the legal and the illegal. So if we find something that is illegal, we absolutely need to shine light on it. But we also need to shine light on the, like, you know, it's legal for a corporate PAC to give a politician money. And in the governor's case, they can give it to him, they can give it to the lieutenant governor, they can give it to their slate, they can give it to his slate, they can give it to their inauguration committee, right? So when you get to the governor's race, you all of a sudden, and you know, for the Senate president and the Speaker of the House, they have their own accounts, they have House leadership and Senate leadership PACs. So the way it works is a PAC can give money to any of them. If you decide that you want to run for county council and it's just you, that's $6,000 that you could get from, you know, the Righteous People's PAC or something like that, right? Yeah. But if you were the president of the Senate or the governor, you suddenly have 4 or 5 or 6 different accounts that they can direct that money into. And what you will end up seeing is that those folks get the results they want, right? Like, you know, people are buying organizations and corporations and people are making these contributions because it gets them what they want, which is a better regulatory environment, the ability to sell their products. You know, if you look at the energy companies right now, BG&E have had record profits in the last year, and ratepayers are paying record rates in the last year. And Democrats in Annapolis might complain about that, might wag a finger at it and say it's bad. But at the end of the day, the people who are in charge are still making decisions that allow that to continue happening because that's what the people who pay them want.
Right. And it feel like they don't care about the Marylanders or the working families again. And they on top of that, um, Westmore is a pro-Israel, and some of these funds seem like it's going to Israel's certain state pensions.
Yep.
Percentage of that going to the state of Israel, and what I see Westmore is um, a um, just a ballhead Zionist that's trying to um, follow suit, just like the APAC.
Yeah. I mean, I think Westmore says that he's not running for president. And who am I to disagree, right? He goes on The View and he says he's not running for president. He goes on The Breakfast Club and says he's not running for president. Like, everybody thinks he is, but he says he's not. I think everybody thinks he is because he's doing the kind of things that a Democratic Party presidential candidate would do. He's siding up to the tech industry. He's working with Wall Street. He's working with the Israel lobby, and he's making sure that he repeats the right words about Israel. I don't know. We did a section about Israel a couple of weeks ago on our show, and ultimately, our position is that the state of Maryland really shouldn't have a position on whether it's Israel or Palestine or whatever, because that's really not our business, right? Like, that's not the state of Maryland's business, but Westmore has made it our business. He has continued to fund the Maryland Israel Development Center. He's extended, there's state bonds, there's state retirement funds invested in Israeli bonds. There's weapons that move through the port of Baltimore. And he continues to identify himself as a friend of Israel time and time again. So I think he, like much of the rest of the Democratic Party that has national aspirations, just think that's the way that they're supposed to do, and haven't learned the lesson of watching a genocide live streamed to us, and haven't learned the lesson of a bunch of voters saying that the party that soft pedals lesser evil genocide can go to hell. If we think back to 1844, when the Whig Party was the lesser evil supporting slavery, I think there was a lot of Whigs probably, like in 1845 and 1846, who were wondering what happened, pretending that they didn't lose because of their position on slavery. And I think we have a lot of Democrats doing that right now, and I think Westmore is one of them. And in this case, slavery is not a direct equivalent to the genocide in Gaza, but there is enough of a connection there that we can be informed by that history.
Yes. Also, another thing was young. It seemed like he's putting a band-aid on. He's not doing nothing about programs for young people that's been in and out of locked up for car theft or anything. They back at the house in a couple more hours without. He's not using like grassroots organizations to fund them to help these young people.
He is as marketing material. So he will say things like the Enough Act invests in small community organizations because that's where the real change occurs. But for him, the Enough Act is enough. It's enough and it's funny that he's named this, right? Like, it is enough for him to be able to check that box, while he's really directing his money to his friends at the big corporations, the big universities, and the academic and the nonprofits, right? And so he has this all of the above approach to juvenile crime. And what that seems to mean is that he's going to lock up more and younger kids. He's going to put more people into the system, and he's not really going to address the roots of the public safety problem. And instead, he's going to keep cycling kids through the Department of Juvenile Services. And and he's also, it seems like he wants to keep Maryland auto charging as many young people as adults as possible. He's not solving the problem. He's looking at things that make people happy, or that make certain people happy, but he's making the problem worse. And
Right.
he's not investing in the kind of programs we know are working, based in Baltimore, where the real change has occurred.
Yes, these young people are they won't change, and they um even better options, um and Westmore is like he cares about his ego, and we understand he's a multi-millionaire and book author, and you know he walk around like the Fresh Prince of Bel Air, and with nothing like mm, with nobody's changing, pushing the needle or anything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. There was a poll that came out recently that was like, I think he had like 52% approval in the poll. People were like, we kind of like him. The top reason, when they asked people what the reason people like him was like, well, he's a nice guy and he's a good person and things like that. I think that people can't really point to anything that he stands up to Trump, right? So it's like the things that he projects on his IG, nice guy, cares about people, stands up to Trump. Those are the things that are resonating with folks. But if
Right.
you are a Democratic governor in charge of a state like Maryland, where you have veto-proof majorities in both houses of the General Assembly, and you have lockdown control on the 8 largest counties, you should be able to be big, bold, exciting, get more stuff done, instead of like kind of reasonably manage, like sort of middle managing the state like he is.
Right. Mhm. And it's like it's identity politics that people are brainwashed to, instead of like the substance.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is this sort of um, there is a first black first black governor of Maryland, only black governor in the United States, that does a lot of work to shield him from being a kind of mediocre neoliberal corporate aligned governor. But I also think there's a lot of people who see through that, and a lot of people um, who understand that his whole identity is part of a package that is meant to sell a certain vision of the Democratic Party, and not just his blackness, but the way that he shows up at sporting events and the way that he, does. He's cool, right? Like, seems like a guy you'd want to shotgun a beer with or something, if that's the
Right.
type of thing you do, right? And I think he's trying to mold that image in a way that covers up for the fact that he is in line with billionaires and philanthropy nonprofits all over the country doing stuff that's bad for people. And I think he wants a world where these corporations and their nonprofit philanthropy arms are actually the solution to the problem, because that's the world that he knows how to work in. But I don't think they're the solution to the problem, obviously. So
Right. Yeah, and it's and mm, I still think Dream Party can get those over 200,000 um, votes also, but it would take um, a lot of door knocking for especially millions of door knocking in the state of Maryland.
yeah. So I like, we set our goal at 100,000. I like your challenge to double that goal to 200,000. So, like, we'll do what we can on it next year. in this year, we're really going to do what we can to raise awareness about the campaign, make sure people know what we're about, what choices they have, and that there is an option outside of just being sad and voting for one of the two parties. Next year, as we get close, and so we'll do that for the first half of next year while the Democrats are having their primary and all of that type of stuff. We just want to make sure that people are aware we're out there. By next summer, we want to be in the ground across the state, knocking on doors, holding events, empowering our supporters to hold events, going to fairs, festivals, all those type of things that candidates do, and having people knock on doors, having people canvassing at transit stops and things like that. So we're gonna keep doing this awareness raising stuff for about 6 more months, and then we're gonna hit the ground running in the spring and the summer on really pushing, knocking those doors, talking to as many people as we can, hitting our goal of 100,000 votes, and then working toward your goal of 200,000.
Yes, definitely. People want to see the first chickens and cats in the governor's mansion.
Yeah, we will happily pack up those chickens and those cats. My wife and I will drive down there and live in Annapolis for 4 years if we win. But we also think that there's value in running the race, showing people what's possible, showing people that a third party can change the direction of the debate, and more importantly than that, change the outcomes on the ground in their community in a way that makes sure that they have the Maryland they want and the Maryland they deserve, and not the Maryland that some corporation or some corporate politician tells them that they're stuck with.
Yes, exactly. And we've seen Westmore hasn't been haven't paid homage to Black freedom fighters, especially like Asasa Shakur, and even the woman that from the Tulsa massacre from Black Wall Street. He didn't have no public statement whatsoever, and he's going by working for his party, and that's it, and using those talking points. And
yeah, totally. I mean, I don't expect Westmore, a former military guy and a governor who's really connected to a lot of billionaires, to say a good word about Asada Shakur, right? But at the same time, he will say a good word about, like, conservatives who he'll say he has plenty of good words to say about plenty of people when he wants to say that he's trying to appeal to all Marylanders. But what I think he really means by that is he wants to be able to move to his right in his appeal and not to his left in his appeal. So what I think he wants is, whenever he says is progressive, is what he gets to define as progressive, and then everyone outside of that is radical, and everyone to the right of that is part of, like, how he gets to see his bigger Maryland. So I'll say this: like, when I'm governor, one of the things the governor gets to do is to make proclamations for days and to recognize people and things like that. And we will have no hesitancy to recognize Asada Shakur and the Baltimore Panthers and the other Panthers who were in Montgomery County and Prince George's County in Southern Maryland as part of a history of Maryland that needs to be recognized, that needs to be commemorated. And we'll have days. We'll have Maryland Panther Day. We'll make it official, Maryland Panther Day. And that type of thing is a thing that I think a lot of Marylanders wish we had, because it is part of the fabric of our state, and it is a thing that we need to be able to recognize and appreciate. So, you heard it here first. Maryland Panther Day will happen when we are the governor.
Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. And it's just an honor for you, Andy Ellis, to be on this podcast. You can come back anytime to the show. Definitely, we welcome you.
Well, Wayne, thank you so much. I'm excited to get to be on the show. I will take you up on that offer to come back. We'll have more news coming around in the beginning of 2026, and once we get ready for that door knocking time, I don't know if you're a guy who likes to door knock or not, but I'll come out and we'll go door knocking together in some place that you think is a good place, if that's a thing that works for you. Otherwise, we'll come have a conversation in the library or come to some event near you, and we'll make sure that we can tell the people, we're living in these times, but we have these choices, and that they can be different and they can be better.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Wayne.
All right. And you have a good one.
You too.
All right.